While the end goal is the same, entertainment, video games are much more interactive than movies or books. A book tells the reader what's happening, and a movie shows the viewer what's happening. In a video game, you live what's happening firsthand.
Designers have to work meticulously to make sure everything is exactly the way they want it. They have to handcraft beautiful landscapes for players to explore and write hundreds, if not thousands, of lines of dialogue so that every character feels unique and real. Similar to how movies use music to create another level of depth, video games can use music to encapsulate the player into their new world. In this video, we will explore several different musical tracks from the Legend of Zelda series of video games. We will analyze how well the music fits the areas that it is presented in, as well as analyze some of the shortcomings in the soundtrack. Please note that this franchise uses and reuses different musical tracks a lot. It borrows and draws heavy inspiration from other games in the series. This helps bring a sense of familiarity and nostalgia while also highlighting important differences between the two games. Many tracks will be looked at other than the main track being analyzed. This is to help viewers who may not be exposed to these games have an idea of where the music originated. One final thing before we begin, this franchise uses the same villains and heroes in almost every game. It sounds really weird, but they're different reincarnations of each other. Just know that this guy and this guy have the same exact name, but are two different Ganondorfs. But they have the same soul, making them kind of, but not really, the same person. It's difficult to explain. It's not important, but just wanted to let you know so you don't get super crazy confused. The first thing we're going to look at is a town. It's pretty simple. Most medieval towns would be considered kind of crazy and hustly-bustly, and that's exactly what we see here. So the first thing you'll want to notice is that instantly it's big, it's loud. This is a living city with a lot of people going through it. It's all over the place and it's really well done. Something else to point out is that as you progress towards the heart of the city, the music gets louder. So as you're on the outskirts and towards the entrance, it's all muffled and quiet, and as you get through, you notice, oh hey, this is a city.
Now let's take a look at another area of the game. This one wasn't done so well. Early on in the game, you enter an area called the Lost Woods, a forest that takes you back to the beginning if you get lost. The Lost Woods are designed to be confusing and mysterious, but the music doesn't reflect that at all. This clip is a little disappointing because it kind of sounds like a forest, but it's mostly just repetitive. And it's designed to correlate with the main character of the area, whose name is Saria, and mirror her theme. But there's no real mystery to it, especially when you learn the exact same song from Saria. Take a look. The most disappointing part about this track is that Nintendo nailed the mystery of the Lost Woods in an earlier game, A Link to the Past. You feel that, right? Just the look in the game and the mystery of the track just makes it feel like in Ocarina of Time, Nintendo cared more about Saria's character than they did about the mystery of the Lost Woods. It seems Nintendo learned their lesson, because in the next game, Nintendo found a way to make it both recognizable, allowing players to remember Saria and relate to her, as well as make it mysterious like it was in A Link to the Past. Clearly this is from a different game in the series. Like I said, this takes place from the next installment that came out 8 years after Ocarina of Time, 2006's Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess seems to find the balance between familiarity, with the callback to Ocarina of Time's theme, mystery, with the callbacks to A Link to the Past's theme, in addition to adding its own flair and style to the mix. For this next part, we're not going to look at any particular song from a single game. Instead, we're looking at the final dungeon theme from a few different games to figure out which one best matches the feeling of a final dungeon. A final dungeon should give you the sense that this is it. that everything you've done is leading up to this moment, and that everything you've learned will be applied here. This is the final fight to put an end to the bad guy's evil plans. The first theme that we're going to look at is the final dungeon theme from Ocarina of Time. Coincidentally, this is actually the first final dungeon theme in a Zelda game. Before this, every game and every dungeon sounded pretty much the exact same. So the whole idea of different dungeon themes in Ocarina was huge to people, and this ending dungeon was no exception. It was big. Here's what it sounds like. It's big and it's in your face. The second you walk in, you're like, oh man, it's here. It immediately has this sense of imminent danger and holds on to it while you make your way towards the final fight. And after all the puzzles and all the enemies, it's just you and the big bad guy. The music is perfect, especially considering that once you get to the top of the castle, you find out that the bad guy Ganondorf has been playing the music the whole time. This next one is from Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess takes a much different approach than Ocarina of Time on how it musically presents the theme of the dungeon. In the plot of this game, instead of destroying Hyrule Castle and building his own, Ganondorf decided to use a puppet army to force Hyrule Castle into submission, allowing him to take over without destroying anything. With that said, it should be mentioned that the Twilight Princess's Hyrule Castle relies heavily on the music from A Link to the Past's Hyrule Castle, so let's take a listen to that one first. Now that we have a better understanding of Twilight Princess's inspiration, let's take a listen to how it interprets the castle theme. Most notably is the extreme contrast from the big in-your-face opening of Ocarina of Time's final dungeon. Ocarina is big and loud, while Twilight Princess is much more subtle and elegant. Ocarina of Time had a much more big, epic organ intro, while Twilight Princess only starts on a single note on the flute. This difference is for a couple of reasons. Ocarina had its world destroyed by its incarnation of Ganon, which was in truth a very young soul of Ganon. He'd only done this twice before, and his first time he really didn't do well, and he wasn't very strong, and he kind of got wrecked. Basically, Ocarina's Ganon didn't know the full extent of his power, and just goes really overkill. In Twilight Princess, he knows what's up. Ganondorf is significantly older. Just look at him. He's got a beard, he looks rad, he's strong. Not only that, but technically this isn't the first time Ganon has been punished for being evil in this reincarnation alone, but that's another story. Remember, really long, really confusing timeline. Anyways, listen a little longer and you hear his original castle theme played in the same delicate manner as the rest of Hyrule Castle's theme is played. As the player makes their way up the castle, the underlying theme of Ganon's castle gets clearer and clearer and more intense. This is first signified by a key change when the player gets to the third floor of the castle. The music is much less delicate and the bass line is much more clear. The contrast between the heavy tuba and delicate flute signify that the final fight is slowly approaching. Finally, when the player is right outside of Ganon's throne room, the delicacy of Hyrule Castle takes a hike, and all that's left is Ganon's evil theme. Video games are by design an interactive medium. This interactive element requires music to set the scene for players because in any given moment the player is never actually there. Be it a spooky forest, an evil castle, or a normal market, the music allows players to be fully immersed in the world around them.